Today I'm sharing 5 interior design illusions that lines can create to make a room feel taller, wider, deeper, and even calmer. We'll talk about perspective lines, boundary lines, vertical lines, horizontal lines, and weird squiggly lines, aka non-rectangular lines. And I promise you that by the end of this video, you will not look at lines in interior design as you did before. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So let's start with our first point, perspective lines. Perspective lines are the visual lines your eyes follow to suggest depth, direction, and spatial extension. They often converge towards one or two vanishing points, shaping how large, deep, or narrow a room feels. Perspective lines are usually the edges of the room, ceiling beams, various floor and wall treatments, as well as the edges of large furniture that are parallel to the walls. These are some of the first lines we take notice of when we try to understand a space we see for the first time. But understanding how perspective lines work can also be a way to trick the eye into perceiving a space as longer or deeper than it actually is. This type of illusion is a trick mostly used in stage design, where the impression of depth needs to be created in a very limited space. You can see this in Palladio's Teatro Olimpico, where in order to create the illusion of a deep street, he used trapezoidal spaces instead of rectangular ones. He also raised the floor and lowered the ceiling towards the back to make this depth seem even bigger. Now, typically this is not a technique used in home design because things could look gimmicky, but you can take a few light ideas to create a bit more drama in spaces that are bland, like corridors. You could use a carpet whose lines converge a little stronger towards the back. You could also play with wall decor, decreasing the size of the wall art towards the back to make the space slightly more dynamic. For homes with a light, playful touch, I think something like this could work. As I said, it's not often used in home design, but it's a very cool illusion nonetheless, definitely worth mentioning, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. But maybe you do not want to make a space look longer, you want to make it look wider, then the boundary lines of that space are going to be very helpful in achieving that goal. Boundary lines are the outer edges of the perspective lines. Whether made by hard edges or lighting, they tell the eye where the room ends. Boundary lines have the power to either compress a space or make it feel really large. Here are a couple of ways they can do that. Number one, high contrast trims. They create the illusion that the ceiling feels closer and the space more contained, sometimes even smaller. Decorative, very pronounced trims in the same color as the wall and ceiling create a strong shadow that reveal the contour and give elegance and definition, but without shrinking the space. They definitely attract your attention to them, but they don't make the space feel as cramped as strong contrast does. And number three, no trims at all is an option you might choose when you want to expand the size of the room. The boundary vanishes and the walls and ceiling blur. With a lack of strong definition, the room feels more airy. Number 3. Horizontal lines. Horizontal lines guide the eye across the space, making it feel broader and more grounded. You'll see this a lot in Japandi wabi-sabi style homes, with furniture very low to the ground in the lower 20% of the room. In a bedroom, you will see the bed frame, which is placed lower than the average frame, elongated by the side tables, accentuating horizontal lines close to the floor. Same with the living room. The couch is so close to the ground that it is often surrounded by floor pillows or poofs because they are the only ones to match that height. Coffee tables are located just as low, giving a strong focus to the floor area, making the room feel heavier and giving it a strong sense of calm. Wainscoting is also a good example of accentuating the horizontality in the lower part of the room, especially when combined with a darker color in the lower section. It just brings the main focus to the lower area of the room and it makes the room feel calmer and more grounded. Other ways to accentuate horizontality and create a sense of calm include long surfaces such as floating shelves, wide art pieces, or elongated mirrors. Another category of lines that is very important is vertical lines because they can visually stretch a space upward, which can be very useful, especially in rooms with low ceilings. Now, how do you do this? You have to focus on accentuating lines and edges that stretch almost the entire height of the room. The edge of a Japandi coffee table will not be noticeable enough to accentuate that vertical effect we are looking for. So you might pick floor-to-ceiling curtains, or you might accentuate the frames of doors and windows in a different color to lift the eye towards the ceiling. You might also pick furniture or decor in vertical format like bookshelves, art, or mirrors. Tall plants can also be a natural way to lift the eye. Wall treatments like wood paneling that recreate vertical rectangles can also create the illusion of height. The vertical lines also have that ability to make a space look deeper. So I want to talk about this really cool illusion that vertical lines do, even though it is not used in home design that much, but more in stage design. But still, I think it's so interesting that I want to share it. So basically, you want to start with parallel lines and then slowly reduce their width and the spacing between them as you get closer to the end, together with exaggerated perspective lines to create the impression of depth in a tight space. You might want to do this in a fun room for kids or perhaps a forgotten corridor that needs a bit of drama, but be very careful not to overdo it. A subtle version you can try can be a striped rug, tapering in scale, with gradual tighter spacing towards the back. This could definitely be a fun addition. Number 5. Diagonals and other lines. Playing with other types of lines in interior design can be dangerous. Here's a small video I took at the Museum of Illusions in a tilted room filled with lines. The room had straight walls, but the floor was inclined. Technically no big deal, I walked on slopes before. However, because of all the lines on the walls, I felt nauseous, and I imagine by looking at this video that you might feel that way too. Non-rectangular lines can bring movement and dynamism, injecting energy into a room, but too much of it can also feel chaotic and disorienting. Rooms like this can look exciting in a showroom, but they could feel uncomfortable for some people to live with. The key here is to reduce their contrast and size into fine patterns that give a bit of an excitement to the senses without overstimulating. So let's look at a couple of examples. One good example is chevron or herringbone flooring. You can feel it there, but it's very fine. Furniture placed at an angle to the room grid, for example a reading chair tilted off its axis, gives a slight element of surprise without overstimulation. Braided bathroom tiles can create an interesting pattern that engages the eye without feeling nauseous because the verticality is also accentuated. So use non-vertical lines in small doses and combine them with simpler vertical or horizontal elements for balance. Avoid using big diagonals with strong accents on floor, ceiling, and walls all at the same time and in the same room. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this video about line illusions, and if you want to learn more about color illusions, check out this video.